Welcome back to Turning the Page. I'm host Donnie Morse, and we have with us Jeff Olsen, who's written a new book, I Knew Their Hearts, a new book published by Cedar Fort under imprint Plain Sight Publishing. We want to thank Jeff for being here with us. Before we went to commercial break, Jeff, we were talking a little bit about your experience you had with a previous football opponent. You had started the physical healing at this point, but I think there was some emotional healing that was yet to come.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my physical injuries were extensive, but it was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of losing half my family. And I think the hardest part of that, about that, beyond the bereavement, was I was driving the car. I mean, the guilt and the regret and the wondering of how could have I changed any of this whole situation was, it was quite a heavy burden. I mean, it was big.
And it weighed on you.
Yeah.
So did writing the book, did that help some of that?
You know, it did. Readdressing it was quite healing. I mean, the spiritual things, the out-of-body or near-death experiences were fresh like yesterday. But readdressing some of those processes I went through to really forgive myself, you know, for what had happened and coming to the conclusion that it was not my fault, and that everything has order, that everything in our lives happens for a reason. Writing that down and getting it on the page was healing for me, yeah.
So you've actually had more than the one near-death experience then?
I did. I had a profound near-death experience right at the time of the accident. I mean, at the scene of the accident. We were driving down the I-15 northbound, 75 miles an hour. I had the cruise control set. And, everyone was in their seat belts, and we're driving up the road. My wife, Tamara, was sound asleep, actually. She had reclined her seat, and she was holding my right hand, and I was driving, with the left hand. And our little guy, Griffin, was asleep in his car seat. And Spencer, my oldest son, was playing with the little Star Wars toys that he'd gotten for Easter in his Easter basket. But for whatever reason, we veered to the right. I overcorrected to the left, and we proceeded to roll down the freeway, not off the freeway, but down the concrete, with it, which at that speed they say we probably rolled 7 or 8 times. And when we finally came to a stop, and I must admit I blacked out through a lot of that. I knew that my wife and baby were gone, but I could hear Spencer crying in the back seat. So I knew he was okay, and I was, from what I could tell, pinned either on the seat or the floor underneath the steering wheel there, and I knew I was hurt bad. I mean, I knew that I was struggling to breathe, and I kept telling Spencer in the back seat that it would be okay, and I was trying to move and get to him, which is the worst nightmare for a father. I mean, I can hear my child screaming, I know half the family's gone, and I can't move or breathe, and I'm losing consciousness, and I literally, at that point, left and went to another realm, which was the first profound out-of-body or near-death experience. And without giving it all away, I was kind of told I wasn't done. I had to come back. But in coming back and consciously wandering through the hospital as a soul, encountering doctors and nurses and patients, and seeing them and feeling them in such a deep way. I mean, I knew their love, I knew their hate, I knew their decisions, I knew their motivations, I knew everything about them. In fact, that's where the title of the book comes from. I knew their hearts in such a profound way that it changed how I see the world forever.
Now, through that, you actually had a confirmation of your near-death experience from one of the doctors and nurses.
Yeah. Months after, I mean, I was still in the hospital, and I was well enough that they were starting to let, people from the neighborhood. I had been in intensive care for months, and they were only letting immediate family see me. But as people started coming in, a couple came in, a man and a woman. I didn't recognize them. I thought, gosh, they're not from the neighborhood, they're not from work, they're not from church. Who are, I didn't know who they were, and it was embarrassing. Until they introduced themselves, and they weren't a couple at all. It was my ER trauma doc, and then one of the head trauma nurses there, who had been the first to see to me, and they had a profound spiritual experience working on me, which was so validating. I mean, I knew what I had experienced was real, and
But it was so real to you that it was a kind of neat or profound, as you say, to have it confirmed by independent third party, so to speak.
Right, completely unattached to me. It wasn't family. It was like these were just clinical staff that were working on me that had spiritual experiences as well.
And again, at that time, that doctor told you that, again, that your injuries were so severe that he didn't expect you to survive.
Yeah, he's actually become a dear friend of mine.
Oh, really?
We still, we get together for lunch about every month, and yeah, he said, I've never seen anyone with your injuries alive, let alone survive them. I've never seen anyone with your extensive injuries still breathing and heart beating. So this was your major near-death experience here, and again, where you had an opportunity to be literally full of charity towards all men. Everyone that you met there, as you say, you knew their hearts. Yeah, and in knowing that, regardless of what walk of life they came from, it didn't matter what they did or what they didn't do. I loved them. I mean, I loved them in such a profound way. I was compelled to embrace them, and I knew as I was experiencing this that this is how God sees us. I knew that. I mean, I'm like, wow, this is how it really is when the veil's lifted and we see each other for who we really are.
I want to go back. In the first segment, you talked a little bit about this BYU group and this Salt Lake group. Are these experiences happening by lots of folks?
This is the interesting thing. They're quite common. I mean, as the books come out and I've been flooded with cards and letters and emails, most of them say, I had an experience very much like that. And the group that meets, IANDS is the name, IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. We have speakers every month that come and have had very similar experiences, out of body, near death, very profound spiritual things that have happened to them.
Wow. I mean, that's... I'm sure reassuring for you, for your experience, and also quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So beyond that experience, later you had another experience.
I did, and probably the most poignant for me personally. I mean, it was at the end of my hospital stay. I was off all the major medications. People have said, oh gosh, that was a morphine-induced high, and it doesn't matter to me. I know what I experienced. But at the end of my stay, when there was not heavy medication, I had just finished my last shoulder surgery, I had another visit to that place that I can find no better word for than home. I mean, that's what it felt like. I'm home. And had a beautiful experience where I was able to see my baby son and say goodbye to him, but also encountered what I call God. And in such a profound way where I felt His love for me and knew that everything was in perfect order, that there were no accidents, that there were no, tragedies, that it was all part of this perfect plan, individually customized for me to learn what I came here to get. And in that light and love of all that divinity, I realized that I was divine, that we all are, that we're all part of that great whole, and that each path is absolutely perfect for the individual to walk.
Well, Jeff, I want to tell everyone that, again, this is one of the best books I've read this year. For the last 5 years, I'm going to say one of the best books I've read. It is a profoundly moving experience, and I am very, very grateful that you've taken an opportunity to write it down and share it, and we are profoundly grateful that you're here to talk with us today. Is there any last comments you'd like to say? Who should read your book?
Everyone should read the book, whether you're hurting or not, but I think the intention in writing the book was to create a place for people to heal. And we all have our stuff. We all have things we're working through or going through. And the book does. It opens a space where people can heal and get their own answers. And it has nothing to do with me or my story. It's just a matter of opening the heart and letting the answers flow in.
One of the things I really like is here in the back of the book, you actually put your email address, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's a website. It's
okay.
I call it At One. It's www.atOneNow.com. And you can write me an email there and share things. That's where all the emails have come flooding in. of people sharing their experiences or talking about what they're dealing with or how the book has assisted them in the process. But yeah, I love stuff like that. That's what makes it worth it. So if you've read the book or if you read the book, please reach out because I would love to. I'd love to connect.
So your book, I Knew Their Hearts, again by Jeff Olsen, available here at Confetti Antiques and Books. We'll have signed copies available for people as well. All LDS major publisher or bookstores will have it available as well. Jeff, thank you for being here today. We've really appreciated this, and again, thank you to Spanish Book 17 for being here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Flattered.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Welcome to Turning the Page. I'm host Donnie Morse of Confetti Antiques and Books. And today we have with us a very special guest. We have Jeff Olsen, who has written a new book, I Knew Their Hearts. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, Jeff, you've written a book that I know our audience is going to absolutely love. I've had a number of people who have picked it up and who come back literally in tears telling me that the book has changed their life. And tell us a little bit about what drew you to write this book.
You know, it's interesting. I never set out to write a book. I mean, that wasn't my intention. I had the accident, the tragedy. I'd had the profound spiritual experiences, but I held them quite close. I mean, I didn't talk about it. And, to me, they were sacred. It wasn't meant for everyone to know. And it was interesting because I was actually sharing in a very private group some of the things that happened to me, and a woman there said, there's someone you've got to meet. You know, I've got to introduce you to this guy. He's down at BYU working in what they called the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which was a mouthful. But anyway, she introduced us, and he said, we record these experiences, and we look at all the similarities or differences. We just study them. We look at them and see what are people experiencing from all different walks of life, from all over the world. And he said, can I record your experience? So I sat down and shared with him what had happened to me. And in that process, he says, you've got to come talk to our group. I mean, there's a group that meets in Salt Lake. You've got to come share this. And I was still reluctant, I said, I don't know, it's pretty personal stuff. But he assured me it was a safe place, to come and share, and that would be like-minded people. So anyway, I did. And through that whole situation, I was introduced to the publisher, who approached me and said, let's do the book. Please do the book. Tell your story. And I was still reluctant. I mean, as in the book at the end, what I ended up doing was going back to the scene of the accident. And, for those who haven't read the book, we had a terrible automobile accident in southern Utah, crushed my body up. Both my legs were crushed. I lost my left leg above the knee. Ribs were crushed, seatbelt cut through me. But the most devastating thing is that my wife and child were killed in the accident, and I had never really gone back to the scene. And my older brother was in law enforcement, so he could tell me the exact mile marker, right where it happened. And that's where I went. I went back, and I literally spent a couple hours there, just being with, okay, am I supposed to write this book? Is this really what's meant to be? And that's when I was moved to do it. I mean, that's when, just the universe kind of said, get over your ego. It's not about you or your story, and it's not about how well you can write, because I'm not a writer. I've written a book. I suppose I'm an author at this point, but what I knew and what I was told spiritually was, by sharing your experience, just honestly sharing your experience, you'll open up a space for people to heal and for people to get their own answers no matter what they're going through.
Well, when I read your book, I think that's exactly what happened to me. I did open up this space that you're talking about, and I found it empty and I started searching for some things, and that was a very good moment for me. It really was an awakening, an opening for me. I found it to be literally for 2 to 3 days, all I could do was cry. I honestly, I could feel your pain, I could feel your happiness, I could feel your joy, and that brought me the same feelings. I was profoundly moved by your book, and that's what customers who have picked up the book have said to me as well. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you grew up. And
Sure. No, I grew up not far from Spanish Fork. I grew up in Charleston, which I laugh and call a suburb of Midway. But I went to Wasatch High School just up Provo Canyon, and Utah County was kind of where we came to go to the city. And in fact, Tamara, my wife, who I lost in the accident, was from Orem, right down here. So I spent a lot of time in Utah County, and in fact, in Spanish Fork here, we leased or rented a lot of hayfields. We couldn't grow enough alfalfa for our dairy herd up in Wasatch County. So I spent a lot of time in Spanish Fork bucking hay bales.
Oh, really?
And putting it on trucks and then hauling it up Provo Canyon so we had enough feed for all the milk cows. So.
Huh. So you went to Wasatch High. Mm-hmm. If I'm not mistaken, you were quite the athlete.
Well, I was quite athletic. I mean, there were better athletes at school, but I was on the rodeo team. I wrestled. I played football, and football was my favorite. I just fell in love with football because at the time, I probably weighed about 205 pounds, and the wrestling coach wanted me to be 185, and the football coach wanted me to be up at 220. And I decided, you know what, I like to eat, and it was really good to go hard for 6 or 8 seconds, then rest for 25, and that was a little bit easier than a 2-minute round of total, exertion. Wrestling was the toughest thing I ever did, but I loved football and played with my brothers, and we had a good team, and we did really well. In fact, I ended up going to Utah State and playing football up there. So
after the accident, in your recovery, you had an experience with one of the opponents that you had played football with.
Yeah, that was a really profound experience. I'd been in the hospital for months. I spent, after the accident, I was so banged up. I was in the hospital for 5 months. I had 18 surgeries as they tried to piece me back together. But this was at the end of my stay, and I was in the rehab, center, and they would take us down to this little gym. I was moving my amputated limb and doing some things like that, but actually ran into a fellow that we had played on an opposing team, and here it had been, 15, 16 years, and he recognized me, and I recognized him. We had both been on the All-State team, and so we knew who each other were, and there we were in the hospital. He was in a wheelchair, and had been in an automobile accident as well, and it had rendered him paraplegic. In fact, he was just trying to learn how to move his arms. But it was a very profound thing to find ourselves in that situation, and then to see what we could learn from each other. And, at the time I was feeling quite sorry for myself, and yet as we had an exchange, I realized that, there's always somebody somewhere who may be hurting worse. And it was a profound, very learning, deep experience.
I saw that myself as I read the book, as you detailed that experience. Again, I felt your pain, and I felt your emotions as you went through that. And I can see how it would be a learning experience for you and for anyone who really reads the book. Mm. I have a sister-in-law who has spent literally 6 months in the hospital. She went in for a routine surgery that turned really bad, and she has spent 6 months literally in and out of the hospital and in rehab. And we gave her a copy of your book, and she read the book, and she had struggled with smoking and some other issues, and through your book and some other things that have happened, she has recommitted herself to changing her life.
Wow.
And I really think the emotion that you portray in your book through the spirit is just astounding.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's what does my heart good. I knew I was meant to write the book, and I thought, well, if it's a handful of people that get touched by it, then it's worth doing. And I hear stories like that, and I say, okay, that was the one. That's the person I wrote the book for. And it is intimate. It's very personal stuff. And I have just kind of opened my heart up and laid it out there, which was a scary thing to do. But feedback like that just reassures me that, you know what, we're on the right track, and it's all good. So.
Well, I appreciate it, Jeff. We're going to take a commercial break. When we get back, we'll talk some more with Jeff Olsen about his experiences with his near-death experience and the other things that have happened in his life. We'll be right back.